Welcome to episode 2 of my Ford Capri 3-litre Ghia Resurrection project. We got it running off a jerry can in the last episode. In this episode, I'm planning to get it running from the fuel tank with all fluids, bring it up to temperature and see if we can get it to move. We haven't tried it in gear yet. This car was recovered about 2 years ago, a little bit of a barn find. In the last episode we got it up and running. So the first job, I've already removed the thermostat housing. You can see all the rubbish in there, it's all dried out. See the end of the pipe there, not very nice. And I've removed the water pump as well, where that orange gunk is at the bottom. So the first job is to flush it out with some clean water. This is the water pump that came off. Not in the best condition. And we're going to fit a new one later. Some fresh water going into the radiator. Flush that out, check for leaks. No apparent leaks from the radiator, although there might be once it's under pressure. Now try to clean out the engine block by spraying water into thermostat housing, and once it gets around the block it'll come out where the water pump fixes, sort of in the 9 o'clock position. Here it goes. Quite a satisfying job, getting rid of all that rust. I just kept spraying water until it kind of eventually started running clear. Next job, remove the radiator. 4 bolts, 2 down each side. I'm going to repair it in a later section of this video. For now, just trying to get it removed from the car and clear. Next job was fitting the steering, power steering kind of tensioner pulley. This has had a new bearing fitted into it, it was seized. So just refitting it there. Again, 2 bolts. Fit the belt later. Power steering, the other belt, the alternator belt, has to go on first, so this is just sort of getting it fitted and out the road at this point. Next up was replacing the coolant hoses that run around the engine. This one goes from the thermostat housing to the choke on the carb. Most of the pipes are all cracked and corroded. I don't think they would hold water, or not much water under pressure. So old one removed. A little clean up of the mounting surface, and then fitting the new one. 2 new juggle clips. Next hoses are the ones that run the clear matrix in the car. Bit of a nightmare to get to, it was difficult to film. But once I got them slackened off, they sort of wiggled out and released. Same with the bottom one. Not the easiest to get to, but easy compared to modern cars. obviously refitting the pipes. One of them runs to the water pump, or will run to the water pump once it's fitted. Goes sort of underneath the exhaust manifold and gets clipped into position. Once that one's on, it did fit properly and tightened it up. Then the top one runs from the other side of the gear matrix back to the other side of the carb to the choke. And get that tightened up. The only other two pipes are the pipes that run from the water pump to the radiator, from the thermostat to the radiator. Obviously can't fit those at the moment, so I don't have a water pump and I've removed the radiator. Next up, fitting a new thermostat. So back on my favourite compound, fit the gasket, which wasn't a very good fit. I had to elongate the holes a little bit. It didn't just seem to be the perfect dimensions, but hopefully it'll seal, and then on with the cleaned up housing. Tighten them up. The next job I decided to do was replace the engine mount. It looked a bit that had seen better days, and I figured with the water pump removed I had way more access here than I normally would. So now would be a good time. I've jacked up the bottom, as you can see, just on the edge of the sump, just sort of where the bolts are that hold the sump on. I've put the jack under there just to hold the engine. Obviously it would normally be supported by these mounts. The first job, slacking the two bolts, the nuts, top and bottom. Top one here is nice and easy to get into with the ratchet. The bottom one is a bit more troublesome. There's not a lot of space to swing a ratchet, so it's basically doing quarter turns of a spanner until you get them loose, but they both come off without too much issue. Now it's a case of jacking it up to try and get enough gap to pull the old engine mount out and slip the new one in. Jacked it up a little bit, as you can see, not enough. So jack it a bit more, basically as far as it could get to go without putting too much strain on other components. So little by little, so close, a couple of threads stopping it from coming out. Offer up the new one, it's actually got shorter threads, so it will slip in with less clearance than the old one will come out. Next plan, pry bar. So close. I think with an extra pair of hands, could have probably got it out this way. A little bit of leverage, I think, could have probably got it pulled out, but difficult when you're doing it on your own. You hardly see it here, but I'd managed to get a screwdriver behind it and just pull it up, and it comes out. I don't know why it didn't come out so easy earlier, but That's the bottom end of it off. But because the hole that goes on the engine side is quite tight, it then sort of jams itself at a bit of an angle. I've probably damaged the threads taken out here, but I didn't really care. It was an old one anyway. There we go, it's out. Say the new one fits in a lot easier, it says. From memory it fitted out easier. Put their hand there. There we go. So, new one in, top bolt on. To line it, like you can see, it's just got shorter threaded bar, which just makes it a lot easier to fit. Gently let the jack down, aligning it where it sits in. And then it's a case of tightening them up, or putting them on, tightening them up. Down a bit more. To the point the jack's no longer supporting it. Tighten up the top one. Nice and easy. Tighten up the bottom one. Get the longer spanner on just to give it the last couple of tightens, make sure it's tight. This is where it all goes wrong. That noise there is the bolt, threaded part of the bolt snapping. And it's the horrible feeling when you start to tighten a bolt and it gets to a point where it's being pretty tight and then it's slack. And that's it breaking. And that's what it looks like after it snapped. Slightly annoying. Anyway, I had two, so I refitted the one from the other side to this side, and this time I didn't tighten it quite so tight. So, job done. Slightly annoying. Took way longer than it needed to. And I didn't film the second time, because it was exactly the same as the first. Anyway, onwards and upwards. Next up was fitting the water pump. On with my favourite sealant on the gasket. For sticking that on the block. And obviously offer up the water pump. 3 bolts to secure it. Get them sort of finger tight. And then obviously tighten up the ratchet. Next up, one of the hoses from earlier, the bottom one that came off the bulkhead. fits the back of the pump. This is the one that was routed behind the manifold. Push that on, tighten that up. This water pump has an extra inlet or outlet, which the old one didn't have, so there's still a blanking cap to go onto that, sort of in the 12 o'clock position there, pointing upwards. Next up, fit the belts. So the first belt round the water pipe, round the water pump, round the alternator. Sort of pull it tighten up the bracket. After that, the second belt for the power steering. This is the one that I fitted the idler pulley for earlier in the video, so it goes between the crank, the power steering pump, and the idler pulley sort of gets gets pulled up and holds the tension. Next job is to repair the radiator that I removed earlier, so the sort of support bracket that bolts onto the car, as you can see, is a bit loose. This solder's come away. So I've been following a YouTube guide on how to repair this, not something I've ever done before. Basically clean up the surfaces, liberal coating of flux, and then a bit of heat with the flux. So it cleans and prepares the area. I think I did this twice, just to try and get the surfaces as clean as possible. So yeah, carefully kind of wiping the flux away and any sort of residual dirt. The cloth was still quite black, to be honest, after that. Hence doing it on a second occasion. So yeah, some more flux. Wiping it. Try and get it as clean as possible. I then ratcheted up the radiator to hold the bracket in place and try and get the panel tight onto the header tank. Then more heat and plumber solder, trying to heat the panel and let the solder melt into it. So we're trying to do along the top and down one side. There's a couple of holes in the middle that I tried to get some solder into as well. Solder wire was getting a bit short, so I had to readjust. Probably putting too much, to be honest. You can see it dripping out a little bit. But my theory was better to have too much than too little. And that's the finished job. Buffed it up with a finger grinder. just to make it look a bit neater. Some radiator black paint, high heat resistance, liquor paint on the top panel, and the header tank. That looks pretty good now. Then obviously refit it into the car, so the same 4 bolts that come out. Get used to rescrew it. One of these was a little bit difficult to get to, kept falling out. Anyway, with the radiator then secured, the final 2 hoses can then be refitted. The top one from the top of the radiator to the thermostat housing. Tighten that up, and tighten the other end. And then this is the bottom hose going on, so this is going on at the bottom of the water pump to the bottom outlet on the radiator. Again, just from a different angle, just getting them tightened up. And the only thing left to do now would be to fill it with water or coolant. I'll do that a little bit later. With coolant side taken care of, the next job on the list was to sort out the fueling side of things. Start by securing the car to stop it coming forward, jacking it up, and getting some axle stands underneath the rear axle so it can work safely underneath. Need to remove the feed and return line and the 2 electrical connections to the sender unit, which is on the side of the fuel tank. They're both removed. One of the wires was snapped. The other one here, squiggling that off. Been on there for a little while. So that one off too. Into the boot, as I want to be able to put some penetrating fluid around about the fuel intake pipe, which is hidden behind this rubber bush. Quite often they sort of are resistant, the tank can be resistant to sort of slide off, so a liberal spray of WD-40 into there hopefully penetrates into the rubber a little bit and helps it slide off once I've got the retaining straps are removed. This is retaining straps here that go around the tank onto little sort of J-shaped bolts, which are quite a long thread, too long for my deepest socket, so I have to use a spanner to get it down to length that I can reach them. Once I can reach them, I can remove them. So 2 nuts, a sort of nut to hold it, and then a secondary nut behind it to lock it in place. Both of those need removed. That's the first one at the passenger side. This is the sort of first one at the driver's side. I was quite surprised that these come off, to be honest. I thought I'd probably have to cut the bolts. Bought some new ones, but I was able to remove the nuts and reuse the bolts. And then the second bolt, which is the one that's actually holding the weight of the tank. There's not a huge amount of weight in it because it's more or less empty fuel. I don't know if it's been drained at some point or it's just evaporated over the years. second strap removed now. That's the sender end of it. And then it's a case of trying to wriggle it free from that pipe that I put WD-40 on earlier. Just getting that strap out of the way. And yeah, a good yark. Pull it down and it will eventually come. In fact, I think it just eventually gave up. There we go. And that's the old tank out. Underneath you can sort of see a section of the car that's otherwise hidden. Pretty decent condition, to be honest. Lots of dry rust, sort of surface rust. Nothing wet, nothing old. It's had a little bit of welding on some of the boot floor in the past. You can see this little section there just above where my hand is at the moment. It's also had a section in the spare wheel well, but overall pretty fresh and pretty original. I didn't film it, but I then went over it with a steel brush, rubbed this all down and just sort of flicked it off my hands there, but I also did it properly with a brush, which makes quite a mess when you're lying underneath the car. And then applied it with sort of wax oil underseal sort of mixture, just to protect it. At some point I'll probably do the whole car with this, but I just wanted to get the section that's hidden by the fuel tank. Here's the old tank and the new one side by side. A couple of bits to move over from the old tank to the new one. This is the sender unit as an example. First job is this inlet rubber gasket O-ring. I would have bought a new one, but they were out of stock and I didn't want to hold up the job, so just reusing the old one, give it clean, get it stuck on the new one. With that in place, it's back over at the old tank to remove. I think this is like a one-way valve. It allows sort of air to exit the tank, but it's also a sort of security device in that if you rolled the car over, it wouldn't allow fuel to come out of the hole. I do have a new gasket for this. These were available. I think somebody told me that they're the same ones that fits a Ford car, Ford Fiesta or something like that. Anyway, that's fitted with the new seal, a tiny smear of rubber just to get it to sit in properly. It was a little bit tight, and the original valve is meant to be a clip to hold that little pipe to the side, but the clip's missing, but we'll maybe get a hold of one at some point. If not, it doesn't really matter. And then this is a sort of section of tubing that runs between the sort of higher point of the tank where my left hand is at the moment, round to the other side. I believe this is just to let air vent between the two sections. So as the fuel sloshes back and forth and it displaces air at one end of the tank or the other, it allows the air to get back and forth. I think that's what it does. The tube off the old tank was a bit old and brittle, so we've got some new ones. This is the fuel sender. I've already chopped it out of the old tank, sort of chop it with I'm sure you probably get a proper tool, but I used a sort of large blunt screwdriver anti-clockwise, and it sort of comes out. You can't quite see it, the camera wasn't quite high enough, but put it into the new tank, a new seal with this as well, and same sort of thing, hammer and screwdriver, and tap it round, kind of locked in place. Let's see it there, sort of final few taps to get it back to where it needs to be. That's us ready to put it back into the car. Line it up underneath. Get into position. Start by getting it back onto that sort of filler pipe. It slides up much easier now it's all clean. And then get the first strap around. Just get the knot finger tight to hold the strap on, and then do the same with the second strap just to get it held in place. Then tighten up the nuts, which pulls, you can see the tank there getting pulled up into position. One side, and then the other side. And then fit the second knot, which is to sort of lock it in place and avoid it coming loose. That gets done both sides, only filmed it at one side. And then this is the feed and return pipes reconnected. I need to do something about the wiring for the fuel gauge, but worry about that later. And then the final job, obviously, to support it under the jack again, pull out the jack stands, let the car down. Front of the car, we've got a tiny little section of rubber pipe which goes from the plastic pipe into the steel piping. This is the old section removed, really old, brittle, rotten, basically. This is the sort of final section of pipe that needs replaced as part of the overhaul. And then that's the new piping on, new jubilee clips to hold it in place, because we don't want any leaks. Next job, new HT leads, plug leads, whatever you want to call them. Fun bit. So let's try and get it running off the fuel tank with coolant in the system and see if we can't drive it forward. Do we have gears? Does the diff work? So in with one jerry can, check for some leaks. In with the second jerry can, up to 10 litres now. Fill it with water. I'm using water because there might be leaks, and I kind of want to flush through the system. We saw the dirty water when I flushed it by hand, but after it's been running, I want to drain it and then put in coolant. Immediately found a leak. Thankfully it was just a jubilee clip that wasn't quite tight enough, so tightened that one onto the bottom of the radiator. So a bit more water after that's been tightened up. And then try and start it. I need to take a little bit for the fuel to sort of pump through, or be sucked rather, from the fuel tank up the carb. But nothing. Felt a little bit like deja vu from when I was trying to get it started off the jerry can in the previous video. Not often the spark. Not often the fire, at least. First thing I wanted to check was what fixed it last time, which was the points inside the distributor, which for whatever reason the two contact points seem to be coming out of alignment. Don't know if you can see it here, but there's sort of two little round points there, sort of don't fully face into each other. So got those realigned. Try again. Still nothing. With the battery getting flat and the family car away, I tried the second battery. I'd also at this point, somewhere around this point, pulled the plugs out to see if they were getting fuel, and they weren't, they were dry. I'm convinced that it's a fuel issue, starvation issue. I jacked up the back of the car there to try and push some of the fuel. Thought it was maybe just a little bit on the low side with 10 litres, maybe not quite enough. Just put the jack underneath to try and push some of the fuel towards the sender. But that didn't help either. So back to the petrol station. Some more of Shell's finest V-Power. See if that would help. Got my other Capri now on the jump duty to make sure I've got enough voltage. I've been trying it for quite a bit by this point. Still not sucking the fuel through. So my next theory was if I could get it to start again off the jerry can to prove that I haven't caused any other issues, but also if I started off the jerry can, I could then put the feed pipe back to the fuel tank and maybe the suction of the engine running would pull the fuel through. Having the engine be turning over and turning the fuel pump faster than what it does on the starter. So with the jerry can in place, try and start it again. This thing it burst into life from the jerry can. Switch it off. Put the feed back to the fuel tank. Start it again, so it's effectively running on what's in the carb. See if that's enough to suck the fuel from the fuel tank and keep the car running. The revs. Give it a little bit of time to see if it's actually still running off the carb or if it's now running from the fuel tank. But if it sputters out, it's still not getting fuel from the tank. I then had a bit of an idea. Could the feed and the return be round the wrong way? So I've swapped the feed and the return pipes, given it a bit of a rev, just to build a bit more power to the battery again, and try it again. See the wipers work. That's done by accident. Looks like I'm about to give up. It's a lie. So the whole time, the feed and the return were round the wrong way from the tank. Not sure if it was my mistake when I swapped the tank, or if it's been like that for a number of years. I don't know why this car never ran in the first place. But that's it running. No battery booster, no jerry can, and no leaks on the coolant side. So happy days. Achieved sort of part of what I want to achieve out of this. The other part, of course, was to see if it can actually kind of drive it. Does it have gears? Does it go forward? Is there anything in the diff? Just check for each there before we try anything more. A little bit of smoke coming off the manifold from the rocker gasket. So, first a bit of a wood cutting. Fence post, because I don't have brakes. I do have a handbrake. And this is the first time trying the car in gear, trying to see if it will move under its own steam. Success. Does seem to be running off a cylinder now, but we'll worry about that another day. Try to find reverse. Got that too. Another thought in first. Happy days. But definitely need to sort those brakes out, which will be the job for the next video. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Do like and subscribe, and I'll have an update as soon as I can, where we'll hopefully get it to stop in a more functional way than a bit of fence post. Thank you.